Right now, like roughly 60% of knowledge workers are intentionally using AI in their daily workflows. I mean, we are using it.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is.
Right. But get this, only 14% of organizational leaders actually report being proficient in designing effective interactions between humans and those machines. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
We are looking at worldwide AI spending projected to hit like $1.5 trillion. And the vast majority of companies are treating this massive paradigm shift like it's just a routine software update.
It is a staggering disconnect. I mean, the technology works, the adoption is definitely happening, but the promised value just isn't materializing for most organizations.
Okay, let's unpack this. How do we spend over $1 trillion, see a 60% workforce adoption, and still fundamentally fail at the execution?
Yeah, that's the trillion-dollar question, isn't it?
Literally. So, our mission today is to figure out how to thoughtfully architect collaboration between humans and machines. We are leaning heavily on insights from a really fascinating 2026 paper by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover.
Which is based on that massive Deloitte survey, right?
Exactly, a survey of over 3,000 business leaders. We want to give you, the listener, a shortcut to understanding the future of work. So tomorrow, whether you are walking into a strategy meeting or just evaluating your own daily workflow, you actually understand the architecture of this shift.
And to understand the failure, we really have to look at the missing architectural layer.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, historically, companies have become incredibly sophisticated at designing human-to-human collaboration. We build complex org charts, reporting structures, agile pods, all of that.
Sure, we've had decades to figure that out.
Right. And we are equally sophisticated at machine-to-machine design. We have APIs, automated data pipelines, perfectly integrated tech stacks. But the space between the human and the machine that is essentially a void in most corporate strategies.
The socio-technical design space.
Okay.
It's that exact moment where human judgment meets an algorithmic recommendation. And yet, something like 59% of organizations are operating with what the research calls a technology-first lens.
Yeah, they're just buying the AI and layering it directly on top of legacy processes.
Without changing a single thing about how the work is actually done. It is like having a 19th century horse-drawn carriage and deciding to upgrade it by scrapping a modern jet engine to the roof.
That is a terrifying visual, but yeah, it's accurate.
Right, you don't upgrade the wooden wheels, you don't reinforce the frame, and you certainly don't train the driver on avionics. You just fire up the engine and hope for the best.
And when that wooden carriage inevitably starts shaking apart at Mach 2, organizations cycle through different levels of panic. The jet engine strapped to the carriage is what the research identifies as the default overlay.
Default overlay, okay.
Yeah, a company buys a large language model license for everyone, or they just drop a chatbot into a workflow. But they leave the job descriptions, the decision protocols, and the quality standards completely untouched.
So the foundation is the same.
Exactly. Employees might find a tiny bit of personal efficiency, but at the macro level, it creates massive confusion about accountability and process.
So if the default overlay starts failing, I imagine the logical next step for a panicked leadership team is just to try and patch it defensively.
Which leads to the second tier, reactive adjustment.
Reactive adjustment.
Right, they see the wheels splintering, so they start bolting on fixes. They roll out a training program only after the workforce starts complaining that they are overwhelmed.
Oh, like a Band-Aid.
Exactly. Or they build an escalation pathway only after an AI hallucination causes a major client error. They're still treating the technology as the primary driver and the human needs as just a secondary, opportunistic fix.
Which brings us to the tiny minority actually getting this right. Only 6% of leaders say their organizations are engaging in proactive architecture.
6%, that's so low.
I know, right? They treat human-AI collaboration as a socio-technical design challenge before they even write the check for the software. They explicitly map out the workflows, deciding exactly what requires human empathy and judgment and what requires algorithmic processing.
What's fascinating here is the data on this is definitive. Organizations taking this human-centric, intentional design approach from day one are 1.6 times less likely to experience subpar return on investment compared to their tech-focused competitors.
That is a massive difference in ROI.
It really is.
And we need to look at what that actually means on the ground. What happens when a company gets this interaction layer right versus when they just bolt the engine on? Because the financial stakes are huge, but the impact on the worker's daily reality is profound.
We can see the pure mechanical difference in the European telecommunications case study. Initially, they took that default overlay approach we talked about.
Right, the jet engine on the carriage.
Yep. They deployed an AI expert system into their customer service department to help agents resolve issues. But they didn't change the metrics the agents were measured on, and they didn't change the workflow.
Let me guess. The human agents probably just ignored the AI because learning to use it slowed down their call times, which they were still being penalized for?
That is exactly what happens when you ignore the interaction layer. They saw a remarkably poor 5% productivity gain.
Ouch. 5% is nothing for that kind of investment.
No, it's terrible. But they realized the error and pivoted dramatically. For their broader rollout, they took their implementation budget and allocated a full 90% of it strictly to human-AI interaction architecture, not the tech itself.
Wait, 90%? What does spending 90% of a budget on interaction actually look like in practice?
Well, it means fundamentally re-engineering the workflow. They established explicit trust thresholds in the code.
Trust threshold.
Yeah, meaning if the AI was only, say, 75% confident in a solution for a billing error, the system was hardwired to route it seamlessly to a human, rather than forcing the human to constantly double-check the AI's guesses.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. They engineered clear escalation pathways, so workers knew exactly what to do when the AI failed. And they provided comprehensive behavioral training on how to critically evaluate algorithmic outputs. They taught the workers how to be partners with the system.
And the result of changing the workflow instead of the tech?
Productivity jumped to a 30% improvement, a six-fold return differential, purely from designing the socio-technical layer.
Wow, that is incredible. And this intentional design doesn't just drive raw efficiency either, it drives speed and agility. Take the Levi Strauss example.
Oh, the baggy jeans one.
Yes, when baggy jeans suddenly emerged as a massive consumer trend, they didn't rely on their historical, slow, sequential design process where one department finishes their job before passing it to the next.
Which takes forever.
Right. They built cross-functional human teams, designers, merchandisers, and marketers, all in the same room. But they specifically augmented those teams with AI-powered trend analytics.
Because they pre-established how the humans and AI would divide the labor, the AI analyzing the velocity of the trend data across social media, while the humans evaluated fabric constraints and brand fit, they were able to move from insight to a market-ready product in just 3 months.
3 months?
Yeah, they cut their historical cycle time in half and boosted category sales by 15%.
That speed is why agility is the primary competitive focus for 67% of survey respondents right now. But beyond the corporate metrics of speed and sales, the way we engineer this interaction alters the very meaning of work.
It really does.
It can turn a soul-crushing job into a highly strategic one, or it can strip a job of all its humanity.
The 7-Eleven case study perfectly illustrates that shift toward meaning. They brought in an AI agent named Rita to tackle the hiring process.
Rita, the AI recruiter.
Exactly. But Rita didn't just passively screen resumes. They designed the interaction. So Rita handled the mind-numbing logistics, the initial screening, scheduling the interviews, answering the repetitive candidate FAQs. Rita automated 95% of those routine tasks, saving the company 40,000 hours a week.
See, in a traditional tech-first company, that's the moment they just fire half the recruiting staff and pocket the savings.
Right, but 7-Eleven engaged in proactive architecture. They intentionally redesigned the recruiter role. Because the logistics were handled, the human recruiters physically shifted their focus.
To do what?
They became strategic partners to the store leaders. They spent their time understanding the local culture of different stores, assessing the soft skills of candidates that an AI just cannot read, and building relationships.
That's the human element.
Yeah. Hiring quality improved, turnover dropped, and the recruiters experienced a massive boost in job satisfaction because they were finally doing the deeply human work they were actually hired to do.
We see a similar cognitive boost in the MetLife Japan study. They used AI as real-time scaffolding.
I love that concept.
It's so cool. During emotionally complex customer service calls, the AI analyzes the tone and sentiment and provides the human representative with empathetic prompts like, the customer's voice is elevating, consider pausing, or acknowledge the frustration here.
And did it work?
It actually resulted in a 13% increase in customer satisfaction. More importantly, it reduced the cognitive load and stress on the representatives. The AI acted as a behavioral coach, actively helping the humans develop advanced emotional intelligence skills over time.
So the AI is functioning as an exoskeleton for human capability.
Exactly, an exoskeleton.
But there is a very real danger here. If the socio-technical design is poor, the technology doesn't act as an exoskeleton, it acts as an atrophy machine.
Right. That brings up a genuinely terrifying concept from the research. There's this study by Damani and Bobot about GPS navigation. It proves that heavy reliance on turn-by-turn directions actually physically decreases our spatial memory and our navigational capability.
Wow. Because we just outsource the brain work.
Yes. Because we outsource the cognitive work of mapping our environment to the machine, our brains simply stop doing it. If we translate that to knowledge work, if we blindly accept an AI's writing, its data analysis, its strategic recommendations, without wrestling with the material ourselves, we risk a future where an entire generation of workers loses their spatial memory for critical thinking.
That cognitive dependency is a profound risk. Almost half of the executives surveyed, 42%, actually report being deeply concerned about their employees losing the ability to perform essential cognitive tasks. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this ties directly into a critical concept: interaction debt.
Let's break that down. We know technical debt when you write sloppy code to meet a deadline, and eventually it crashes the system. What is interaction debt?
Think of it as compounding interest on bad socio-technical design.
Oh, I like that.
When an organization rushes an AI deployment, they might implement a system that overrides human judgment without explaining its reasoning. Or worse, they use the AI to constantly monitor, evaluate, and assign tasks to human workers.
That sounds miserable.
It is. Today, you pay a little interest in the form of employee frustration. Next month, the interest compounds as workers stop trusting the system and start actively sabotaging or ignoring it. Eventually, you bankrupt the organizational culture.
That dynamic is called algorithmic management. Workers feel constantly surveilled, they lose all autonomy over how they execute their day, and they just become biological cogs in a machine managed by code.
Yeah, biological cogs.
It is a completely dystopian work environment. So we know the stakes. We have the multi-million-dollar ROI on one hand and a dystopian, de-skilled workforce on the other. To capture the value, we have to look at the mechanical how-to of building this collaboration. The architecture breaks down into macro foundations, how the company is structured, and micro workflows.
Let's start with the macro. The macro design is fundamentally about organizational governance.
Yeah.
You cannot build a seamless human-machine workflow if your leadership structure is siloed. In a standard enterprise, the IT department owns the software budgets, HR owns the job descriptions and training, and operations owns the daily workflows. If the person buying the AI has never spoken to the person writing the job description, the interaction design will fail.
And Moderna tackled this macro problem head-on. They recognize that technology strategy and workforce planning are now the exact same thing.
Exactly the same thing.
So they structurally merged their IT and HR functions. They created a single role, the Chief People and Digital Technology Officer. You have to break the silos so the technologists and the sociologists are in the same room making the same decisions.
And once that macro governance is in place, you can tackle the micro design. This is the mechanical deconstruction of work. The Cleveland Clinic provides a masterclass in this.
Well, yeah.
They didn't just walk into a clinic and say, we bought a new AI, figure out how to be more productive. They took the role of a medical assistant and meticulously deconstructed it into 40 discrete, isolated tasks.
Think about your own job right now, you listening. If you took your typical Tuesday and broke it down into 40 distinct, isolated steps: data entry, drafting emails, analyzing a spreadsheet, running a meeting.
It's a lot.
How many of those tasks are you doing simply because that is how the job was defined 10 years ago?
Right. Once the Cleveland Clinic isolated those 40 tasks, they evaluated every single one against their new technological capabilities. They discovered that 37 of those 40 tasks could either be fully automated, augmented with technology, or reassigned to lower-credentialed staff.
37 out of 40.
Yeah. This deliberate deconstruction saved the clinic $2 million. But the true value was that it liberated the human medical assistants from administrative drudgery, allowing them to focus entirely on direct, empathetic patient care.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Once you deconstruct the work, you have to assign the relationship. If you were managing a sports team, you would never throw a star athlete onto the field without telling them what position they are playing, what the rules of the specific play are, or who they're supposed to pass the ball to.
No, of course not.
Yet organizations do this with AI constantly. They just throw the tool onto the field and hope the humans figure out the plays.
The research forces us to move past just using AI and define the specific interaction archetypes for every single task.
Ah,
You could design a workflow where the AI acts as a direct report.
like a subordinate.
Exactly. The human holds all the authority, delegates a task, and simply reviews the output.
Mm-hmm.
Or the AI acts as an assistant, providing suggestions but waiting for human initiation. We saw the AI as a coach archetype with MetLife, guiding human behavior in real time.
You can also have AI as an iterative collaborator for creative work, bouncing ideas back and forth, or AI as an autonomous worker handling end-to-end background processes. And as we discussed with interaction debt, you can have AI as a boss directing and monitoring human labor.
And a sophisticated organization doesn't pick just one. The study highlights a multinational consumer products company that explicitly matches these archetypes to specific contexts.
How so?
Their HR, legal, and technology teams sit down and map the workflow. For this specific data compliance task, the AI is an autonomous worker. But for this specific performance review task, the AI is strictly an assistant, and the human holds total authority.
That's
They
brilliant.
map the boundaries so every employee knows exactly where their authority ends and the machine's begins.
That clarity is vital. But, you can build the perfect structural workflow, merge your IT and HR departments, deconstruct the jobs, pick the perfect archetypes, and the entire system will still collapse if the workforce is terrified of the technology.
Oh, absolutely. Fear is a project killer.
The final layer of this architecture requires pivoting from structural hardwiring to cultural softwiring.
Cultural softwiring is the invisible glue of socio-technical design. The absolute prerequisite is leadership modeling. Cisco conducted internal research and found that employees are twice as likely to adopt AI tools when their leaders are visibly using them.
But it goes deeper than just use, right?
Much deeper. Leaders must actively model vulnerability. When leaders candidly share where the AI hallucinated or failed them, it signals to the workforce that critical thinking is still valued over algorithmic compliance.
The paper leans heavily into psychological safety as a requirement for this softwiring. But let's be real about the corporate world for a second.
Yeah.
Telling employees it's a safe space to experiment is usually just a poster in the break room. In reality, if an employee experiments with a new tool, makes a mistake, and blows a client presentation, their bonus is still on the line. How does an organization actually operationalize psychological safety so it drives measurable productivity?
It requires hard boundaries. The Save the Children case study proves this is an operational metric, not a buzzword. When they initially rolled out generative AI, adoption stagnated at a dismal 36%.
Why so low?
Workers weren't using it because they were terrified of making a catastrophic mistake with sensitive donor data. The open-ended nature of the tool created paralysis.
So how do you remove the paralysis without just telling them to be brave?
You build fences. They established highly explicit guardrails. They detailed exactly which data could be fed into the AI, which workflows were strictly off-limits, and what the human review process had to look like.
They gave them rules to play by.
Exactly. They also created visible, judgment-free mechanisms for workers to flag when the AI was producing biased or weird outputs. By defining the operational boundaries, they removed the personal risk of experimentation. Once the workers knew exactly where the fences were, weekly usage jumped to 71%.
Wow.
Furthermore, the application of AI to highly complex tasks quadrupled from 10% to 45%. Safety, when operationalized through clear rules, liberates workers to drive hard productivity.
We also see the operational side of safety in how IBM handles ethical reasoning. They don't just publish a list of nice-sounding ethical principles on their website. They built an AI ethics board that is embedded directly into the project development workflow.
Integrated right into the process.
Yeah, and that board has the structural authority to halt problematic projects before they ever go live. When you build structural brakes into a fast-moving vehicle, the driver feels safe enough to push the accelerator.
And this softwiring is never finished, by the way. It requires continuous cultural evolution. Atlassian, for instance, treats their entire new hire onboarding process as an ongoing organizational psychology experiment.
Oh, that's interesting.
They don't just hand a new employee a manual on how to use their AI tools. They constantly test different default settings, different nudges, and different training modules, and then they meticulously measure engagement. By treating the human-AI interaction as an evolving experiment, they drove new, higher AI engagement from 57% to an incredible 93%.
This highlights a crucial question for any organization. Are you treating your workers as passive recipients of new software? Or are you treating them as active co-designers of the future of work?
This raises an important question, really. Are they passive or active? The companies capturing the most value are doing the latter. Trek Bicycle's implementation strategy is a perfect example.
What did Trick do?
Their technology team didn't sit in a silo guessing what the workforce needed. They went out and systematically interviewed workers at all levels, from assembly line staff to retail managers, to understand how AI could improve their highly specific daily environments.
So they actually asked the people doing the work.
Yes, they identified 40 distinct use cases that were focused entirely on employee well-being and reducing friction, rather than just top-down cost-cutting. When workers co-design the system, they own the outcomes.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize this entire journey through Dr. Westover's research, the unavoidable takeaway is this. Integrating AI is not an IT project. It is a socio-technical design imperative.
Beautifully said.
You cannot bolt a jet engine onto a horse-drawn carriage and expect to fly. Look at your own work tomorrow. What is the intentional design between you and your machine? Have you deconstructed your daily tasks? Have you decided if your AI is an assistant, a coach, or an iterative collaborator?
Because if you do not explicitly define that relationship and architect the interaction layer, the technology will default to defining it for you, and it will likely result in interaction debt and cognitive atrophy.
To leave you with something to really chew on, I want to pull one final archetype from the research that we barely touched on, AI as a doppelganger.
Oh, wow. This one is deep.
It really is. This is a system specifically designed to observe your contextual reasoning, learn your unique expertise, and perfectly mimic your absolute best judgments to scale your personal capability across an organization.
A digital mirror that flawlessly replicates you on your best day.
Exactly. So here is the question you need to answer. If your organization successfully builds an AI doppelganger that perfectly mimics your most efficient, brilliant work, what happens to your individual identity? When your ultimate collaborator is a digital reflection of your own expertise, how will you define your unique human value tomorrow?
A profound challenge for the future of our workflows.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.